Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and thank you for joining me for folks' favorite Fandom Fridays. Now, on these Fridays, I get the chance to visit with somebody from the wider world of the Tolkien fandom. Writers, musicians, artists, craftsmen, scholars, content creators, and more. Now, before I get to today's guest, though, I also want to welcome Dr. Sara Brown back to the TTT. She's co-hosted a dozen episodes of the PPP with me, some of my favorites, as a matter of fact.
And you have to say that, though.
Well, but they are, really. I mean, the Steward of the King, that was just a highlight of last season for sure. And folks, Sara's one of my co-hosts on the Rings of Power wrap-up, which is going to be starting up its season 2 right along with the Amazon show next month. And I say next month, but I think this actually comes out in August, so later this month. Now, why do I have a co-host for a Fandom Friday, something I haven't done this entire time? Well, besides the fact that Sara's a joy to work with, she's also Welsh. Always. And always humble, too. And so that might give you a clue as to our guest today. Now, speaking of our guests, I'm pleased to introduce you to the editor of Melyn Bapur, a Welsh publishing house who will soon be releasing Hobbit, a Welsh translation of The Hobbit. Folks, please join me in welcoming Adam Pearce to today's Tolkien Times.
Thank you very much. If by soon you meant like 2 weeks ago, then yeah, very, very soon.
Yeah. Well, we are really glad to have you.
Yeah, welcome, Adam, and thanks so much for giving up your time for us today.
Yes.
Look, this is it, folks. This is what we're getting from
right.
Adam. Yeah,
that's absolutely right.
Fantastic.
Put it on your shelves, folks.
Definitely. Now, I suppose the answer to my first question might be because it was about time, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What was it that motivated you to tackle a Welsh translation of The Hobbit? And given that The Hobbit has already been translated into more than 60 languages, why has it taken so long to get it into Welsh?
Really, really interesting question. Really, with the second one particularly. The first one's kind of boring. The first part of the answer, like everyone else in the whole world, I am a massive Tolkien fan. I must have read Hobbit for the first time when I was probably about 7 or 8, and I read The Lord of the Rings at 10, which I think is probably a little bit unusual. So yeah, massive Tolkien fan, and obviously also Welsh. Grew up as a Welsh speaker with my speaking Welsh at home, speaking Welsh in school. So kind of surrounded by Welsh, really. So, it's kind of a logical thing for me to do. As soon as I kind of really registered that it hadn't been done, I thought, oh, someone should really do that. And then I started writing a novel and realized it was awful. And then realized I'd been putting aside time to do this thing, and I should really just, do something that I would actually finish. And it was also during the pandemic, which kind of meant that I had quite a bit of time kicking around at home. I just decided it was time to pull the finger out, really. The other thing I was doing is the final kind of, I told you the idea a little bit, and then I started reading The Lord of the Rings in German as a sort of learning exercise, and I sort of suddenly realized, hang on a minute, this is the thing I have to do. This has got to happen. So yeah. 4 years ago now, I started. Why is it taking so long for this to happen? Really interesting. Really, well, I think it's interesting. To answer that question, you've got to kind of delve a little bit into the state of Welsh language culture and things like that. But basically, we're really self-sufficient. We don't publish Welsh language publishing is actually really healthy for a small language with we publish more books in Welsh than lots of languages that are much bigger, much more widely spoken. So we're really self-sufficient, but the focus is always on original stuff. Everything is sort of new novels, new stuff, original stuff in Welsh. Translations for adults are vanishingly rare. It's extremely unusual to have any kind of book translated for adults in Welsh, and I guess it's because we can speak English. So most of us, pretty much all of us, and via English, then we have that kind of access to all of the world literature virtually, via English. So I guess people think that there isn't a demand for it, or at least that there isn't a need to translate stuff into Welsh. I mean, I completely disagree, and it's kind of been borne out by the success of the book, really. But I think that's why. That's why it hasn't happened before, was just because like it's just rare for translation to happen anyway. Yeah.
Well, I for one was delighted to see it. Absolutely fantastic. One of the things I found really interesting about your translation, because I think this is unique among translations that we've looked at, is that you've replaced the Anglo-Saxon runes on the map with Welsh runes, the 18th century Coelbren y Berth. Tell us about that decision and why it helps make the book more Welsh.
Well, I've actually got to credit the suggestion to somebody else. I was having a conversation with Mr. Michael Everson, who is maybe familiar to some listeners as the publisher of various versions of the Hobbit, particularly in various other languages. And in which he casually mentioned kind of the opportunity to kind of use different sort of alternatives in translations to the runes. And when he sort of did that, I kind of had something twigged in my mind. And I thought, hang on a minute, I don't want to use Anglo-Saxon runes in a book about Welsh. That would be the biggest, sort of most inappropriate. The use of so it wasn't his suggestion that I used Coelbren y Berth, but he gave me the idea. So the idea of using kind of the Anglo-Saxons in particular were at war with the Welsh for a very, very long time. They still are. The relationship between England and Wales is of course fraught with all sorts of social and political sort of baggage. So Anglo-Saxon runes is kind of would never have sat right in Welsh anyway.
No.
And it's the amount of work it took to actually put it into Coelbren y Berth was probably actually less work than recreating the Anglo-Saxon runes would have been. Because I would have had to kind of rearrange, translate the actual content of the writing into Welsh anyway. So actually, when you're doing that, it's actually fairly simple to just change the shape of the runes. Coelbren looks actually nothing like Anglo-Saxon runes. It looks very rune-like. It's very sort of angular, very, very much. It looks like the kind of thing that a dwarf would carve into a rock. So it looks kind of really appropriate, I think. But it is the individual letters. I don't think any of them are actually the same as an equivalent letter in Anglo-Saxon runes at all. So they are totally different. It's an interesting and a bit of a weird sort of historical oddity that the alphabet. It's basically a forgery. It's not authentic. It's not a real runic alphabet at all, in the sense that it was never written by kind of ancient Welsh bards as people claimed it was. It's believed, I mean, the evidence is a bit kind of sort of dubious about exactly where it came from, but it's believed to have been the brainchild of the notorious forger Iolo Morgannwg, who invented a lot of what are now sort of annual traditions as part of the Welsh Eisteddfod, particularly the National Eisteddfod. A lot of things which he kind of claimed were based on sort of ancient druidic ceremonies, but probably he mostly just made up. And Coelbren is exactly like that. It was actually really fashionable for a period in the sort of 19th century. People would kind of carve their own gravestones with it, thinking that they were resurrecting this ancient written language. But there's no evidence of it kind of appearing before he sort of suddenly very suspiciously discovers it. It's it's almost certainly his invention, a pure invention of Iolo Morgannwg. So in that sense, it's it's a fantasy alphabet, which makes it entirely appropriate. I would argue for a fantasy novel. And like I said, if you look at if anyone just takes a look at the runes, they still look like runes. They still look very much like something a dwarf would carve. They don't look kind of out of place, really. And Anglo-Saxon runes have kind of always been a really weird thing to have in the Hobbit anyway, because they're a real world script. they're not like, you know, if Tolkien had invented a script and used that in The Hobbit, then I wouldn't have touched it. I wouldn't have changed it.
Yeah.
You know, because it would have been sort of a sort of authentic, you know, Tolkienism that I would have felt the need to preserve. So, but he didn't. It's got nothing to do with Middle Earth, and it's no more kind of appropriate really to use that than any other writing system really. Except that they say that they're runes, so you assume therefore that they're carving them on things.
Right.
But you know, Carl Grant ticks all of those boxes whilst being something that's Welsh and being something that's interesting and being something that's you know, got me at least 5 minutes on a podcast. So, you know, it's you know, we wanted to be. I was aware when to decide to do that, I was aware that there were going to be people who would be interested in this book who wouldn't be able to read the book. So I wanted to put something in for them as well that would kind of interesting to you know, for the people who collect, and I know that they exist, the people who collect every different version of the Tolkien book that exists, that they have something that they can say, well, this is a unique thing about this one that makes it different, and you know, rather than it simply being a translation and a translation.
I like that, and I think you hit on it earlier that there's something very appropriate about it being an invented set of runes, you know, a fantasy alphabet, as you put it. And I'm thinking, you know, Tolkien invented languages constantly, and I mean, you know, they're fully developed, and but they were frauds in a way. I mean, there aren't ancient elves who spoke Sindarin or Quenya, just like there weren't, you know, ancient peoples in Wales who carved those particular runes that this fraudster developed. But it's a really interesting and I think appropriate fit, and certainly given the history between Anglo-Saxon language and the Welsh language, I think you're right. It made a lot of sense. I like it. So good stuff. Talking
about the words being appropriate, it occurred to me, and I meant to ask you this. Occasionally you come across a word that Tolkien seems to have made up, but he really hasn't, that actually has a huge connection to Welsh, like the carrock, for example, which is so close to the Welsh word for rock, right? Yeah. Did you come across any other words that struck you like that?
When you say that, you know, it immediately it's almost a Welsh word. Yeah, it's almost a Welsh word, and I called it a carrog, which is not the word for rock, because I can't just call it a rock. But I had to make it something that there was nearly that, you know, without changing it too much. So you know, I can't think of anything else. You know, I can't think of anything else, obviously, but you know, there's definitely you know, there's definitely things like that in there, isn't there? And you've got to be kind of careful when you get to them, and make sure that you're reflecting something of the sort of the sort of slightly different sort of fantasy element of it, rather than making it really kind of bland and ordinary. Somebody asked me once. He said, if you speak Welsh, do you find it really easy to come up with D&D names for your characters? And I said, well, firstly, I've never played D&D, but if I did, like, you know, I wouldn't call my D&D characters Welsh names any more than you'd call them Steve and, you know, John and, you know, Benjamin. You know, you wouldn't. To me, they're just ordinary names. You know, I went to school with 5 people called Angharad. You know, there's no you know, there's you know, that kind of, those kind of names are totally ordinary to me. So, you know, if they're meant to be different, kind of in the translation, you can't just reuse them. You know, you can't just reuse.
No.
That would be like having Sophie the elf and Gerald the dwarf.
That would be exactly, which would be so, you know, so wrong. You know, so when you come across like a carrog, you can't just call it a carreg, because that is just a rock. And then, you know, they asked the question, you know, someone asked, Bilbo asked, well, why is it called a carrog? You know, so Dan explained, well, it's called a carrog because that's what he calls it, and that's his name for such things, you know. So and this is the one that's near where he lives. So, you know, those kind of details, you know, you can't, you know, you just trip yourself up if you try and do anything other than, you know, make it a bit, you know, make it different. You know.
That word nerdery, which I think is really fascinating, leads me to something else very similar. In this case, the Welsh word for rock is very similar to the carrog. What about when words are very similar to an Anglo-Saxon or an Old English word. I'm thinking of Arkenstone, which comes from Eorknenstan, which I think means like sacred stone or holy stone or something like that. What about a word like that? I mean, it's what did you do with Arkenstone?
Yeah, that's a good. You know, you were asking me, and then now you brought it up. Yeah, that's got an interesting story to it as well. So I've called it an archvine. So the prefix arch is like arch, as in kind of arch emperor, you know,
like arch enemy or high.
Things, yeah.
Okay.
And just like that, it kind of means like the great.
Yeah,
or the mighty. So like it's the mighty stone that which kind of totally fits.
That fits, yeah.
Fits the context of what it is. So calling it an archvine simultaneously sounds extremely Welsh, and also describes it quite well. And also it totally echoes the Arkenstone by total coincidence, because of the you know, it's probably not total coincidence. It's probably where there's probably some kind of etymological some common roots to arcane and in English and arch in Welsh probably, you know, an arch in English definitely. You know, there's probably some common root there. So
well, Adam, you know, we've kind of hinted at this before a little bit, you know, when we've talked about the success of the book so far, but what has the reception been like? And I don't just mean sales numbers, though of course we'd love to hear how successful it's been, but how has the translation itself been received among Welsh speakers who are, of course, you know, very familiar with the text of The Hobbit in English?
Yeah, a lot of them are, and you know, if you'd think that would mean that they wouldn't be interested, then you know, not at all. You know, people are actually really keen to. People are really keen to, and that was one of the reasons why I translated it, because you know there are different reasons why you would read a book in Welsh. Okay, you know, you might read it because you want to enjoy just for the sheer pleasure of reading the book, but you might read it because you know, you want to learn some more Welsh, or you want to improve the Welsh that you've got, or whatever. There's loads of different reasons why you might want to you know, read it, and just the fact that you can read it in English is actually almost irrelevant. I believe, you know, it really doesn't, you know, that's not the reason that someone chooses to read a book in Welsh. It's just because they can't read it in any other language. That's like the least important reason why you would read a book in Welsh. So you know, the reception, I mean, we're getting some reviews. We haven't had them yet, but we will. You know, so you know, it'll sink or swim on the back of those. There'll be one in, as I understand, there'll be one, at least one of those in English in a major sort of online publication. Another one in one of the Welsh language magazines. So that's going to be really good. To get that kind of critical sort of response. In terms of kind of anecdotal people telling me stuff, it's been really, really positive. People have said good. People have said how pleased they were with it. You know, there was one person telling me, you know, the one person commented that he said everything about it is perfect. It's as if Tolkien had written it in Welsh, which I thought, well, that's what I was going for. So at least there is at least one guy somewhere who thinks it's that good. So you know, and you know, if you know, I you know, this is not my full-time job. You know, I'd love it if it were, but you know, it's something that I've done as a kind of labor of love. And you know, if it brings that kind of joy to people, then you know, I'm extremely proud of it. You know, you know, if it's bringing people that kind of joy, and as well, it's getting people to read that wouldn't. You know, I've seen other people saying, oh, you know, this is the first book I've tried to read in Welsh. You know, which is really fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted to do. In terms of how well it's sold extremely well by the standards of a Welsh book. You know, if you think that maybe 600,000 people sort of speak Welsh, well, you know, we're already in 4 figures. So, you know, that's one for every 600. You know, at least one for every 600 people who could read it theoretically. You know, that and that's pretty good. If that was an English book, it would be, you know, 200 million or something like that. You know, the equivalent sort of market share. You know, so
that would be good.
I don't know if that's the metric by which you should you know, measure the success of it, but you know,
why not?
It's sold really well. You know, we've sold in all over the world as well. You know, in Australia, in the US, lots in the US and Australia. You know, there's big expat communities out there from Wales. and I imagine a lot of collectors as well, and all over Europe as well. So it's done very well. I'm really pleased with the way it's gone.
That's great.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Adam, diolch yn fawr. Thank you again for joining us today. It was a real pleasure to talk with you, and we both wish you and Hobbit the greatest of success.
Indeed, we do.
Wow, yeah.
Well, thank you again, Adam. Really appreciate it. And folks, that is it for today's Fandom Friday. But come back next Friday to meet another of your fellow Tolkien fans and maybe even learn what niches of the community you might be interested in exploring, including Welsh. And if you're interested in joining me here for a future Fandom Friday, let me know by emailing bartleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, bonus weekly episode, and a lot more. And then join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up this week with Second Age Saturday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.